Morning class. So since we cannot have our BB collab as of the moment, I decided to record my discussion on the next topic, which is on feasibility report. Well, I know that most of you have already an idea what a feasibility report is, but I will just have a thorough discussion of its definition, purpose, and its format because later on I'll be asking you to write a simplified version of a feasibility report. So before anything else, it's very important that you have an understanding first of the different terms used in this chapter. So first one is criteria. These include the things that need to be considered when creating the conclusion and recommendations for a feasibility report. So later on, you will discover that when writing a feasibility report, it is very important that you set specific criteria to be followed because these criteria shall be the basis for the conclusion and the recommendations later on in your feasibility report. So what's feasibility report? A feasibility report is a type of technical document which critically studies the practicability of a plan and recommends an action to carry out this plan. Now, for most instances, feasibility reports are written for business purposes. For example, when a certain company or a certain entrepreneur or businessman decides to put up a business or start a business, a feasibility report needs to be written first. Because without this feasibility report, it would be very risky to start a business without having the potential elements that would affect the business later on evaluated first. So that's why a feasibility report is written beforehand so that also businessmen would already gauge whether or not there will be marketability of the business being planned to be put up. So according to Gerson and Gerson in 2012, a feasibility or recommendation report accomplishes two goals. First, it studies the practicality of a proposed plan, then it recommends action. So occasionally, your company plans a project but is uncertain whether the project is feasible. So this one calls for the writing of a feasibility report. So in the feasibility report contents, you will have to determine whether or not the plan will work, or does the company have the correct technology, will the idea solve the problem, or is there enough money? So one way a company determines the viability of a project is to perform a feasibility study, document the findings, and then recommend the next course of action. Now, do not underestimate the power of a feasibility report because, mind you, most big businesses that we have right now have been built out of a feasibility study. And the strategic study of the marketability of a specific business would highly depend on the results or the recommendations of a feasibility report. So that is why I could say that feasibility reports are very essential, not only in the world of professionals, but also in the world of businesses. Because without it, definitely, one cannot really have that decisive factor on whether or not to put up a certain business. Let's have some examples here. First is on manufacturing. So your company is considering the purchase of new equipment, but is concerned that the machinery will be too expensive, the wrong size for your facilities, or incapable of performing the desired task. So in order for you to really study whether or not in a manufacturing firm, you'll have to purchase new set of equipment or new gadgets. If it's too expensive or not, then you need to research on that. And that goes for the writing of a feasibility study or feasibility report. So you need to research and analyze the options, determine which equipment best suits your company's needs. Then afterwards, you'll have to recommend purchase. So the logic behind a feasibility study is for you to identify whether or not you would have to create a set of recommendations based on existing problems. So you could not proceed immediately to the giving of recommendations without you identifying first the different problems that need to be resolved. So that is why one criterion that always needs to be considered is that there has to be a problem existing. That is why you are looking for marketability. And since there is marketability, you are recommending a set of solutions so as to address issues on marketability or profitability of a certain business. Another context is in the field of accounting. Your company wants to expand and is considering new locations. The decision makers, however, are very uncertain whether the market is right for expansion. So how do you do it? So you ask certain questions: are interest rates good? Are local property taxes and sales taxes too high? Will the city provide tax rebate incentives for your company's growth? So all of these things shall be asked once you start writing the feasibility report. Okay. For those who are into web design, your company wants to create a website to market your products and services globally. The CEO wants to be sure that online checkout is easy, pricing is cost effective, products are depicted in a visually appealing way, and the site loads quickly. So, this issue or this problem on marketability would also call for the writing of a feasibility report. So questions like, how will you make your website stand out from the competition? So you must write a feasibility report to present the options as well as to offer your recommendations. Now, for those into the field of health management, it is the time to update your health information system. With increasing complex insurance and regulatory challenges, your current system is outdated. So what are your options? So for you to critically examine this one, you could install software to help code and classify patient records. So you can hire consultants to help comply with inpatient and outpatient regulations. So whether or not this kind of mechanism would work in the hospital or the healthcare facility that wherein you are planning to have this kind of mechanism, then a feasibility report needs to be written, because a feasibility report, in this case, will study the options before you recommend changes in the current mechanism. So, if we are to put it in a nutshell, a feasibility report is very essential, because without it, you really cannot implement a certain plan, or you could not realize a certain plan based on the problems identified. A feasibility report will also help you fully realize the most appropriate recommendations that you should give to a company or to a department in your company. That is for you to make sure that later on, the set of recommendations that you have given will really work. Because the risk here is that if ever you make decisions or you provide recommendations that are not based on an examination or a critical study of what's really happening inside the company, then the recommendations later on might not work. And that might be too risky and that might be too costly. So it's very important that you write first a feasibility report so that at your level, you could already examine the set of recommendations that you are making. And at the level of the higher ups, they could also have a keen look at how the recommendations would work effectively. Okay, so this time let's proceed to the format of feasibility reports. Now, a good way for a company to find out whether a project is viable or not is not through is through the conduct of a feasibility report. So writing a feasibility report allows documentation of the findings. Now, Gerson and Gerson suggest the following components of an effective feasibility report. I just wanted to emphasize that the format used in writing a feasibility report varies heavily from one company to another. For example, if a feasibility report is written in the context of an academe or an educational institution, there might be a different format, because the components in putting up a certain mechanism or in proposing a certain plan for a certain program in a university setting might be too different from that of a corporate world. For example, those businesses that dwell on accounting, hospitality management. So formats vary. However, this one suggested by Gerson and Gerson is just to give you an idea on the usual, usual or suggested flow of the contents of a feasibility report. Okay, so when writing a feasibility report, we start with the introduction. Just like when you write a research, you need to set the context first. So here in the introduction, you provide the overview or the background of the problem. So you state first the objectives. Okay. So under this subheading, you have to answer any of the following questions, or it would be better if you answer all questions so that you could really provide an in-depth discussion of the problem or the necessity or the sense of urgency why you need to conduct such a feasibility report. First question is, what is the purpose of this feasibility report? So one of your responsibilities is to provide background data. Okay, to answer the question regarding the report's purpose, you have to provide a clear and concise statement of intent. Why do you have to write a feasibility report? What's the problem existing? Okay, So you have to clearly identify at the grassroots level so that you could also correctly identify later on the direction of your feasibility study. Okay. Second one, what problems motivated this study? Of course, you would not want to start a feasibility report without you correctly identifying the problems at hand. So you have to really scrutinize the major problems existing, maybe in your company or wherever you would like to implement your feasibility study, so that based on the findings later on, you could provide correct or apt recommendations. So to clarify for your readers the purpose behind the study, you have to explain what problems cause doubt about the feasibility of a project. For example, if it is a business, is there a market for it? Or if it is a plan or a proposal to purchase a new equipment, is there a piece of equipment available that would meet the company's needs? Or if your business is planning for expansion, is land available for expansion? And if there is an available land for expansion, how much would it cost? So these things need to be considered when writing feasibility report. You can also explain what problems led to the proposed project. So for example, you notice that in your company, you have been using an equipment or you have been using a mechanism for years now that it's no longer efficient or it's no longer effective. So you're planning or you're proposing to have a purchase of a new equipment. Okay. So that could be another problem to be identified under the objectives of your feasibility report. Or for example, current facilities are too limited for expansion. You plan to upgrade the facilities of your company. However, you notice that you could not purchase new facilities here in the Philippines. You need to import. Okay, so if that's the case, then it will be too costly. So before you decide on buying the new equipment abroad, you have to have a feasibility report first so that the body from your company could really decide on whether or not to invest on such high cost facility. Okay, current net income is limited by an insufficient market. That could also be one of the things that you might want to consider. Okay, another thing to put under objectives is your answer to this question: who initiated the feasibility study? So in this case, you need to list the names of the managers or supervisors or the constituents who requested for the report. Okay, so for example, it's your CEO or it's your company president who requested that you write such a feasibility report. So you have to clearly state there that it's actually the president or the CEO of the company who's asking for that report to be submitted. Okay. Another subheading that you need to incorporate in your feasibility report is the personnel. Okay. Under this subsection, you have to document the names of your project team members, your liaison between your company and other companies involved, and your contacts at these other companies. Now, apart from the persons who will be in charge in the conduct of the feasibility study or in the implementation of the proposed mechanism or program, you also need to identify the linkages or the networks. Will there be external networks that will be involved in the conduct of your feasibility study? Or will there be partnerships that need to be forged prior, during, or after the conduct of the feasibility report? Okay, so the personnel here would refer to the contacts, to the liaison, to the partnerships, to the networks, or to the linkages. Okay, it's not only those who will be in charge in writing the feasibility report. It could be anyone who will be involved in the conduct of your study, or maybe in the implementation of the proposed mechanism. Okay, that's personal. Now, second major section is the discussion part. Okay, wherein it's also referred to as the body or the findings of your feasibility study. Under this subheading, you need to provide accessible and objective documentation. So, how do you do it? You provide first the set of criteria. Okay, what are these criteria? You have to state the criteria upon which your recommendation will be based. So, criteria are established so you have a logical foundation for comparison of personal, products, vendors, costs, options, schedules, and so on. Let's say, let's have this complete example. You want to put up a coffee shop outside the Matina Gate, the UM Matina Gate. However, you notice that there are other competitions. Okay, so in order for you to look at the feasibility of putting up a coffee shop outside the UN campus, wherein the location will be situated in an area with a number of competitors in that business or in that field, you will have to look at specific elements or factors that could affect the marketability or the profitability of your business. So the first thing that you need to set are the criteria. Okay. For example, for the criteria, first, maybe one criterion that you could include: what qualifications of employees should you have in your coffee shop? Will you be hiring only working students, or will you be hiring full-time employees? Second one, what products or services will you be offering? Will it just be plainly the service of providing coffee or drinks to your potential clients? Or will there be a twist with the services that you will offer in your coffee shop? Okay, these are the specific criteria that you need to set. So when you propose for a business, let's say, you need to clearly provide what are you trying to propose. Okay, these are the criteria. And then afterwards, once you have already set the criteria from all the elements or all aspects that need to be considered in putting up a certain business or in proposing a certain change, purchase for a certain equipment, okay, you may proceed now to the analysis. So what do you include in the analysis? In this section, you need to compare your findings against the criteria. Okay, so since you have already set the criteria, here in the findings, in the analysis rather, you need to make sure that you provide a clear comparison and contrast of the criteria that you have set and of the findings that you have already based on the examination, maybe of the location and other factors that need to be considered in putting up a business. Let's say the coffee shop that I mentioned a while ago. Now, in objectively written paragraphs, you have to develop the points being considered. You might want to use a visual aid such as a table to organize the criteria and provide easy access. Okay, so generally here in the analysis, it's not only about the criteria, because what we'll be doing here is a research. For example, when you conduct the one I mentioned a while ago in coffee shop, before you can come up with a conclusion and recommendations, you need to conduct a survey. Okay, let's say you conduct a survey with 150 random students in the University of Mindanao. And then you'd like to ask whether or not, if you put up that business, the coffee shop business, will there be market? Okay, so participants or respondents will answer a set of questions that would determine or that would help you determine the marketability or profitability of your proposed business. Okay, so whatever findings you will gather out of that data gathering, you'll have to compare it with the criteria that you have set. Okay, that is where analysis comes in. You have to critically analyze, kumbaga, you have to double check it whether or not the criteria could be met based on the findings that you have gathered from your respondents. That's very important in your discussion of the feasibility report. Now, towards the end of your feasibility report, you need to incorporate the conclusion and recommendations. So what to be included here? Conclusion, in this section, you have to state the significance of your findings. You have to draw a conclusion from what you have found in your study. So generally speaking, a conclusion is just a summary of all the findings that you have gathered, maybe out of your data gathering procedures, let's say the survey that you have conducted with your respondents. Okay? And then afterwards, since you have already compared and contrasted your analysis or your findings rather with the criteria that you have set, you will now proceed to the recommendations. Given that you have critically examined already the marketability or the profitability or the feasibility of a certain proposal, then you may proceed now to recommending items that would help provide solutions to existing problems. Okay? So once you have drawn your conclusions, the next step is to recommend a course of action. Now, what's very vital here is that when you recommend something, it has to be very specific. And when I say specific, it has to be doable. Okay? Meaning it has to be achievable or attainable given a period of time. If that is the case, then you have to make sure that the recommendations that you will provide are recommendations that definitely are feasible on the end of those who will be implementing the mechanism of the project. Okay, through that, you are giving justice to the reason, the real reason why you conducted your feasibility study. Okay, so questions that you need to answer when providing recommendations are: what do you suggest that your company do next? So given that there's a problem existing and that the criteria may or may not be fit based on the findings that you have gathered, which piece of equipment should be purchased? Okay, if you are proposing for an equipment to be purchased, or where should the company locate its expansion? Is there a sufficient market for the product? Okay, so overall, the three important parts of a feasibility report are introduction. Again, we incorporate here the checklist, the overview, the problem. Okay, you set the problem and you also indicate the personnel involved. Okay, the second portion is the discussion area where you provide the criteria, okay, the expected features or qualities of the proposed mechanism or business. And then later on, you also provide an analysis wherein you compare and contrast the findings to the criteria that you have just set for your feasibility report. Okay. And the last major section will be conclusion and recommendation. So in conclusion, you need to provide a summary, okay, on the significance of your findings. And then based on these findings, you have to provide a set of recommendations that need to be implemented by the company, okay, or the corporation where you intend to implement, okay, the project proposal. Okay. The next portion, guys, are actually images of the sample feasibility report lifted from Jersey and Jersey in 2012. Now, this one is too generic, but I'd like to give you an example so that you would have an idea how a feasibility report is written. So here, you have here the preliminaries from, to, date, and subject. Okay, from definitely the one who wrote the feasibility report to the one who requested for the feasibility report to be written, date of submission. Subject here is definitely the topic, okay, or the subject matter of your feasibility study. Now, the heading or the cover page of your feasibility report may vary from one company to another. Okay? We could not say that there should be uniformity in terms of the format to be used here. But again, this is just a suggestion so that later on, when you'll be asked about the feasibility study, you will already have an idea how to do one. Okay? So that's the preliminary section. And then next, followed by the purpose of the report. So you briefly give the purpose. So this is somewhat like the objectives part of your report. And then this is now the setting of the problem. Okay. So here, the writer, Cindy, explicitly stated that the problem is on technology. Okay. So yeah, according to your memo dated August 1, your department needs new communication technologies for the following reasons. So if you notice, it is clearly stated here kung ano yung necessity. And then the reasons for such are also provided below it. Okay? And then vendor contacts, this would refer to the, of course, the personnel, okay, the people involved in the conduct of your feasibility study. And then you have set your criteria for vendors. Take a look at the criteria, guys. The following criteria were considered to determine which communication technology would best meet your department's needs. For example, trainer. Because of the unique aspects of the software, we need trainers who are familiar with password creation, privacy laws, malware, spyware, and corporate email policy. So if you notice, here, it is clearly stated kung ano yung hinahanap nila for a trainer. That is how you set criteria. Okay? Maintenance. We need to purchase equipment and software complete with either quarterly or biannual service agreements. For the criteria, it's like the things that you need to consider so that a specific aspect of this proposal would have to be included in the feasibility report. Okay. Other criteria involved here are service personnel, warranties, cost. Okay. So if you notice, all of the criteria set here are very clear, very specific. Okay. So once you read the criteria, definitely you will have an idea already what the writer really expects after conduct of the feasibility study. And then afterwards, we have the needs assessment. Now, the needs assessment here might be a product of the data gathering conducted by the writer. Okay, pwedeng conduct siya ng data gathering through survey or checklist. Okay, so that she could gather the necessary information to assess the problem at hand. So here, the vendor evaluation, part of the data gathered, cost analysis as well. So the cost analysis here definitely is not through a survey or a checklist. The data gathering for this one to elicit data about cost analysis was done through maybe surveying the market, okay, as regards cost. Yeah, so you need to identify the definite costs so that you could include them in your cost analysis. And as mentioned, you can also present figures or non-post materials in your study, feasibility study, so as to make it more appealing and comprehensive. And afterwards, you provide a summary of findings. It is just a brief summary of the things that you have found out. For example, based on the analysis or the needs evaluation, it is now or it can now be concluded that we cannot purchase the number of laptops and printers you have requested. Doing so exceeds the budget. Can you imagine? The only proposal here is to purchase the number of laptops and printers. But because they conducted a feasibility report, Cindy here, the writer, had a definite idea on the reasons why it's not feasible. That's the power of feasibility reports. Feasibility reports will really give you a clear thought on why a certain mechanism, a certain recommendation, or a certain change could not really be implemented based on certain factors or reasons. And these factors or reasons are strong enough to stop you from implementing. Okay, so I hope you realize that one. And of course, the last important portion is the recommended action or the recommendations. So take a look at the recommended action here. Given the combination of cost, maintenance packages, warranties, and service personnel, electric is our best choice. So it was really recommended here clearly that the best choice would be electric. Okay, we suggest the following options for printers and laptops, purchasing 5 laptops instead of 10. So since the summary of findings here states that it's not doable or feasible to purchase the number of laptops and printers requested by the person, then the recommended action is instead of having 10, we'll purchase 5 only based on the budget allocated, purchasing 1 additional printer instead of 3, and or sharing printers with nearby departments. So the recommended action here is also very specific. Okay, so one thing that you always need to remember is that you have to achieve specificity when providing recommended actions or set of recommendations for the problems at hand. Okay, so that's feasibility report. Overall, a feasibility report becomes very important when you propose a business for business proposal purposes, or when you propose to have a change in your company or in your department, or when you propose to purchase a certain product. Okay, if you would like to look at the doability of a specific recommended action, then a feasibility report will be conducted. Okay, so I hope everything's clear with regard to feasibility report. So if you have questions, please feel free to message me to our LMS classroom, or you could also comment later on in our open forum. So I hope everything's clear. Okay, so thank you very much, guys, for listening. Please wait for further announcements with regard to submission. Okay, thank you.